Where does tone come from? I've heard many theories ranging from the strings, the pickups, wood selection, and even paint. But where does tone really come from? Let's find out together, my friend. I'm Jorge Lanzas, and now we break it down, baby. Alright, thank you so much for being here once again. And first and foremost, let me take this out of the way. And I'm not going to be talking about anything like James Lill or all these people that are trying to debunk tone wood or whatever. I feel like just talking about that subject is really not helping anyone, and it's just like talking in circles. And who knows, maybe one of these days I'm going to be part of that circle, but not today. Today we're not talking about magic or anything esoteric or even like science too into deep. We're just talking about sound and appreciation in a human context. What do I mean by that? Guitar tone is nothing but just a sound. Good tone, bad tone, sweet tone, better tone, worse tone. None of those things exist.
None of those things exist.
Until you insert the human element into that equation. And not just simply the human, but its appreciation, which most of the time we're not even really prepared to talk about it. We don't take a moment to think about why we like the things we like, what are the components or like the recipe, so to speak, of those things that we like. We just like them and that's it, right? But when you're trying to come up with a sound that you are going to enjoy and hopefully other people are going to enjoy too, you need to have a big element of intent that you're loading behind that sound. And there, my friend, is where we can start looking for the tone. Okay, so I think we understand that this is like a very, very big subject. So to narrow it down, I came up with this 5-step roadmap to help you achieve your perfect tone. Not mine, but yours. Okay, step 1.
Vision.
What is vision? Vision is the active component of taste. Taste applied, if you will. Because where taste is something that could be passive, for example, just you saying, I don't like this, I like this is cool.
That's not cool.
That sucks, this sucks, that's terrible, very, very bad. Ew. That is just a passive state. You're just basically contemplating reality. You're not having an active role and involvement into creating that reality. You're just commenting on it.
So you get my drift?
Where taste is just like that gut feeling, that hunch, that little voice in your head, that little twitch in your nose. That instinct, that part of your soul that just tells you that you like something or not. So how do you turn taste into vision? Basically, to be able to get in touch with your own vision, you have to be able to ask yourself questions without feeling like you're going crazy or anything like that, right? Just sit down, relax, and talk to yourself, trying to understand what is it that you really like? What is it that you really want? And my friend, don't be afraid of not knowing the answers, because that's what the path is for, so you can find them. Okay, but let's stop the shaman talk or whatever, like spiritual guide, and let's just get to guitar tone and what we hear, what can we do, and how can we sound better. So to begin with, you have to start asking yourself the questions, for example, do I want a clean tone? Do I want a distorted tone? How distorted? Do I want it to be like lush and expansive with lots of space? Or do you want it to be a little bit more intimate, a little bit more cozy? Do you want to have a lot of dynamic range in this sound so that you can be very quiet and very loud? Maybe you want to have the ability to change the texture by just changing the dynamics. Or maybe you need this sound to be all the way in your face all the time, cutting through a very dense mix. Is it even in a mix, or is it just you playing on your own? Those are all the kind of questions that you need to ask yourself whenever you're trying to make a tone. Maybe you want to brush up a little bit on the lingo of how people talk about this kind of things, like to describe tone, like lush, warm, velvety, syrupy. You know, they're just words, but they mean something, and the more you talk to people around you, the more they start making sense, and the more you play, you're like, oh, that's juicy. Got it. You know what I mean? You get to those conclusions. That's why I said you have to walk the path. And just like that, when you answer those questions, you found your vision, my friend. Congratulations. Okay, so now that you have a vision, step number 2, pick the right instrument. Now you know the kind of sound that you want. You narrow it down. You told yourself,
this is what I want.
Now it's time to pursue it. And even though we live in an era where you can make anything sound like anything pretty much, I believe that starting with the right piece of gear not only is going to save you from a lot of headaches, but also in the end is going to sound authentic. And we all know that in guitar, we value that a lot. And not just in guitar, because I feel like in music, it's pretty much the same. People tend to resonate with those things that they actually consider authentic. Because since music and art is just forms of expression, you kind of want to feel the connection between the artist and that expression of self, right? Same thing here. When something is not really authentic, you don't care for it. But for now, let's adhere to the concept of find the right tool for the job. Is this sound in your head sparkly, like clean, spanky, with lots of definition? Maybe you're thinking about playing something a little bit faster, like sort of like more funky, maybe something a little bit more upbeat. And if that's the case, maybe the best place to start would be a single coil equipped guitar. Strats, Teles, Jazzmasters, Jaguars, they will all do the trick, maybe differently, but that's minutia. But remember, right here we're just asking simple and very general questions. It's up to you to figure out how deep you want to go. Or maybe you're looking for a warmer tone, something a little bit richer, more saturated, something more controlled, something with less noise. Maybe you're more into like the rock sound, maybe you're more into jazz or like lo-fi. In that case, my friend, you may need a humbucker equipped guitar. Anywhere from your Gibsons and Epiphones, Yamaha, Schecters, Gretsch, you name it. There's a ton of different kinds of humbuckers for every kind of taste out there. And if you feel like you really want to play both, you want to have that clean, spanky tone and the warm, nice, rich, sustained harmonic tone, get a PRS. Anyway, all kidding aside, all I'm saying is that you do not have to adhere to like brand loyalty or just follow into like a brand wagon. There's a lot of killer alternatives out there, and I bet you have a great recommendation for us in the comment section. And while you're there, remember to like, subscribe, and do all those cool little things that we like to do on YouTube, my friend. And enjoy this little bossa nova. I hope your day keeps getting better and better. All right, let's get moving. Anyway, you found your vision and you chose your perfect guitar. Now, if it's an electric one, we have to plug it in. And nowadays, plug it in means plugging into an interface to hear yourself in a computer. That's just 2024, right? And for that reason, you need to pay attention to this third step, input gain. This one has gotten tons of attention in the internet, and let me tell you, there's a lot of like weird controversy about this. Sort of like a bunch of myths about it and like a bunch of numbers, and they're making everything so complicated. It's like it's very hard to understand what they're trying to say unless you're watching their screen. But the reality, my friend, is that all this gear and all these pieces of software are being designed to be working between like certain tolerance levels. And those tolerance levels are standardized along like all audio equipment. It doesn't really change. It's not like you have to be adjusting your preamps depending on the plugin that you're using. You need to adjust your preamps depending on the guitar that you're using. And in this case, my friend, I think there's like two prevalent scenarios. One, where you have one guitar, you're trying to do everything with that one guitar. And then the second scenario would be that you have more than one guitar and that you want that your rig sounds good with all of them. So like I said earlier, you just need to be working within those tolerances. So let's say if you're using a single coil equipped guitar, like a Strat, a Tele, a Jaguar, whatever. If you're using single coils, that little input meter in your plugin needs to be reading like around halfway, maybe like call it 40% to like 70%. If you want to sound like a hot single coil, just turn it up. You can go to 70, 80, 90. That's up to you. I'm not going to tell you how you are supposed to sound. This step is just basically making sure that we're not destroying the sound before we actually want to destroy it. And if it's just a humbucker equipped guitar, same thing. As long as you're like around 80 or 90%, you're gonna be fine. But Jorge, what happens if all of a sudden I go beyond 90 or beyond 100 and I hit the red? Well, as long as it's like something like very quick and occasional, let's say like all of a sudden you did this chug, vroom, and there's a tiny little peak, you're fine, my friend. Don't even worry about that. That's not gonna hurt you in any way. But you're trying to stay away from hitting that red too often, right? And so in the second scenario, we actually have several guitars. What I like to do, I just keep my input in one position. If I plug in a single coil equipped guitar or anything that has like low winding, that is not a hot pickup, I'm gonna be expecting to be hitting anywhere from like 40 to like 70, 75%. But when I plug in my humbucker equipped guitars, I'm gonna be expecting to see anywhere from like 90 to 95%, you know what I mean? Right on the edge. And the main reason why I like to do it that way is because in my head, that's sort of like the natural way to do things. Think about it this way. Back in the day, you would plug your Tele into your Bassman and it would be a clean amp. But then you would plug in your Les Paul and all of a sudden you get this grit, the distortion, this edge of breakup. Same thing. When I plug into a clean amp in my plugin with a single coil equipped guitar, I expect it to be very clean and pristine. But when I load it with some hotter pickups, I want it to break up a little bit. So to simulate that, I keep my input section at the same level all the time, no matter what plugin I'm using. And let me tell you, my friend, it works. Some plugins even have like a little target area in the input section so you can actually see what you're doing. And yes, my friend, the numbers pretty much match. That's exactly what they're looking for. Like I say, this is not some weird science. This is just normal audio engineering. Everybody works the same way. There's no minus 18, plus 25, minus 37, no needs minus 67. If you plug pedals, you need 28. That, my friend, is just a great example of getting lost in translation. You could have said the message simpler. Woo, now we're getting really into it. And if you're still here, my friend, let me know in the comment section. Say still here, so I know that you're really into getting a better tone. All right, the next step in this roadmap would be number 4, know your tools. I can sit right here and just start making all these conjectures and start wondering where tone comes from and start thinking, oh, maybe it's the paint in the cavity. Or no, you should be using the copper tape. Wait, these capacitors are not Mallory capacitors, or they're not paper in oil, or they're not orange caps. Or you know what, we need brass in the saddles. Or the maple fretboard doesn't have enough weight. Or the guitar needs to weigh 10 pounds to actually sound good and have sustain. And I'm not saying that those things don't have an effect, but honestly, I'm talking about magnitudes over here. And what we're going to talk about has a lot bigger effect than any of those esoteric and like very talked about things. And I know, my friend, I love to live in the ether too and try to like be esoteric and think about magic and the magic behind music and mojo, whatever you want to name it. But if you really want to get a tone, the missing part, it's you. Yes, sir. All these pieces of gear, all these toys, all these magical things that are worth thousands of dollars are nothing if you don't insert yourself into the equation. It's you answering those questions, wondering, how do I want to sound? And when you know how do you want to sound, you need to know the tools to do that. I cannot sit here with a straight face and tell you that you need a certain kind of wood in your guitar, where there are so many tools at your fingertips designed to change and manipulate the tone to your heart's content. And I'm not talking about just like the things that play inside, like for example, changing your amps or your speaker cabinet, using an EQ inserted in your signal chain, or maybe 3 or 4 or 5 like Tom Bukovac, master of tone, or your overdrive pedals, or why you use a tube screamer as opposed to a clone, or compression, or even just changing the amp altogether to a totally different amp. You need to know when to change your microphone. Nobody said that you can only use a 57. You use a 57 when you need your sound to actually cut through the mix, like you use a 57
when you're trying to achieve a particular sound.
But nowadays, where changing the microphone is just a click away, it makes no sense to me, my friend, when I hear people that are gonna buy a guitar that is satin just because it breathes more, because they wanna get a little bit more high end out of their guitar.
And they have their presses and treble control in 5.
Or the bright switch off, or they're using a bass amp. I mean, all kidding aside, all I'm trying to say is that you need to use your tools, you need to use your instruments, and all these things make a big difference, make a big change, but also, my friend, your volume and tone knob. If the manufacturer puts it there, believe me, it's for a reason, and you should try it. Don't be afraid to use and abuse your tools. Get to know them so you know what they give you, so when you hear a sound in your head, that sound has a knob, a fader, a pedal, a microphone, or something tangible in the real world within your tool set that you know is gonna help you get there. Whew, there we go, my friend. Number 4, that was the hot ticket item today, huh? But see why I keep referring to this as a path? Because if we don't start with the vision, the tools are really nothing. How many people have you met that have everything in the world, and not only they don't know how to play, but they sound terrible as well? Don't tag them or anything, but we know who we're talking about, right? Okay, so basically that's the whole road already traveled. But what's left? Well, sometimes you need a little bit more. And for those who need a little bit more, you need to 5, think outside of the box. And I don't mean this in like the cliche way, like, oh, you need to think outside of the box. No, I really mean it like outside of the box. In this sense, I'm talking about outside the plugin or outside your amp. The same way that you would decide that you need to have like a bunch of racks effects or like a bunch of pedals, you need to know that sometimes to get certain kinds of tones, you will need to get out of the plugin too. And yeah, even though there's a bunch of cases where you don't need anything but like a Gibson into a Marshall and you will get the perfect sound that you were looking for, sometimes, and especially in like more modern tones, there's a lot of work that goes into getting that kind of tone. So don't be afraid to just go in your DAW and like pre-cue, pre-gate, put a transient designer, cut the highs, and then put your plugin. Then do another gate, another couple EQs, tape saturation, buzz that thing into an aux and put like some multiband compression, a little bit more of transient designing, more saturation, a little bit of clipping, more EQ, sidechain it to the kick. And if your session ends up having a million plugins, it doesn't matter. Don't let anything get in the way of you and your vision, especially silly things like, oh, I have way too many plugins trying to make my sound. I bet you there's somebody else that has more plugins. Maybe you're just in the right path. So keep going, my friend. If you're following your vision, following your taste, you know your tools, you know what you're doing, and you need more plugins, put a million plugins, a million buses, parallel compression, anything that you need to get the sound out of your head, into the speakers, and in my ears. But before I keep talking too much, let's go get a few conclusions, my friend. All right, so there you go. A simple roadmap to achieving your perfect tone. So in the end, my friend, can I answer the question, where does tone come from? Yes, it comes from you, and from you too. All these pieces of gear are absolutely nothing if you don't know what you're playing. In the same way that certain kind of chords are gonna sound country and certain others sound like rock, certain kinds of scales and chord progressions are gonna make you sound a little bit more jazzy, certain kind of tones are gonna put you in a certain category, which is a great place to be because that means that you have friends that not only can help you along the way, but that also can help you stay in your way. Because my friend, in the quest of tone, it's very easy to get lost in the sauce and end up changing your vision instead. So stick to it, Get the sound that you want, that you need. Pay no attention to anything else but your gut. Surround yourself with good friends. Watch content that inspires you and that helps you get to the sound that you want, instead of like the content that gets you to want to buy more things, or the ones that sort of lead you to believe things that are like sort of far-fetched. I promise you, if you need a warmer sound, change your microphone, change your cabinet, drop an EQ, and you'll get the sound that you want. More importantly is that you know what you want, my friend. So don't be afraid to ask yourself some questions, look for the answers, and use your tools to try to get to the sound in your head. Anyway, before I keep talking too much, my friend, if you want to watch more videos, go right here. I'll be waiting for you, and thank you so much for being here once again.